Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IMAA's Insights and Innovation session for this wonderful Monday. And today we have the pleasure of having Roy Morgan here today. Not Roy Morgan from Facebook, Roy Morgan from the famous research company. And we've got Howard coming in. Howard's going to be talking about channel planning, and they've actually redefined media channels. So this is super exciting for us to share this with you. They've redefined how channels look and how people engage and how they engage with it. So Howard, over to you to take things over.
Thanks, Sam, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. So if I could just get you to confirm, Sam, that you can see a
Got it.
screen.
Yep, perfect.
That's beautiful. Okay, awesome. So yes, so today I'm going to take you through a presentation which has really been the culmination of a number of months of work at our end, particularly talking to all of our media agency clients, and I know some of you are and may have already seen this or we've spoken to you, and also our media owner clients, which is really going back to basics to go, what is a media channel, and look at some of the metrics that we were capturing around that, and then also to create a simple to use tool to help people have a bit of a rule of thumb. So when you're channel planning for your target audience, what sort of recommendation might you think about in terms of allocating budget to certain channels, just to sort of get people moving. So today the idea is to take you through that, and I'm happy to sort of, if anyone has questions along the way or have some questions at the end, we can go from there. Um, so all being equal, we move to the next slide. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see evolving media channel metrics on the screen. So these are sort of four themes that we were exploring as we undertook this piece of work. So none of these will be new to you, but it was really about sort of playing them out with the data that we have, and also talking to Australian consumers about the role of media and how they interact with the media, and what they think of each media channel. So the backdrop here obviously is an abundance of choice in terms of media choices for consumers. So it means that they've now got more control than ever before over, when and how and what they consume. And this sort of, we believe, fundamentally changes about how we need to think about not only what is a media channel, but how you go about reaching and engaging audiences. And we also know that not all reach is created equal. So a lot of the big channels, as you can imagine, reach 9 out of 10 um, Australians in any given week. But increasingly, many of these channels don't actually carry advertising. So particularly if you think things like Netflix or Spotify, you've got millions and millions of people using these platforms. But then the question is that's total reach. But the question is, how many of them can you actually reach with an ad? So we, need to sort of think about not only just the total number of eyeballs or ears or whatever, but also how many of those can you actually put an ad to. The other thing, of course, is it's not just about reach. I think there's a lot of discussion in the market about sort of evolving beyond reach to using other quality of audience metrics. So really about how often people return or use the channel, or how deeply they engage with the channel, or how much attention that they're showing to the channel. So this evolution has made us sort of create a couple of new quality of audience metrics: audience loyalty and audience engagement, which is really about assessing the depth of relationship between the channel and the audience. And then, this, our belief is that, and again, this is from the conversations we had, particularly with agencies, it was having as much data as we can so that it gives agencies the opportunity to not only let the data lead media investment discussions, but actually having a range of different metrics for different purposes, so you can actually look at the audience in a multiplicity of ways to think about how you might go about putting together your marketing campaign. And we know that increasingly everything's becoming performance led, but we think that letting the data speak for itself means that there is an opportunity to actually think outside the square, or to challenge the status quo, and to think about channels that you might not normally think of, because some of those channels might not have huge reach, but they might have a very, very highly engaged audience. So this is really all about data-led planning decisions. So where we started the whole process was to actually decide what actually is a media channel. And we actually asked a lot of our clients what they thought a media channel was. And I have to admit, when we started the process, I thought it might have been a bit daft asking this question, but generally speaking, we were met with actually, it's quite a good question. And from that, we got what's on the screen is ultimately the high level construct that we landed on. But I think what's really interesting is that a channel now can be anything from the traditional things like TV and radio, but it can actually, it's also Facebook, and it is YouTube. What you might think of as a specific service or platform is considered a channel in its own right, because of the sheer scale of some of these platforms. And I suppose it's really anything that distributes content to an audience can be considered a media channel. And so having this sort of construct now of, say total video, it means that as time goes by, we can add more subcategories to some of these high level sort of categories to cater for, I suppose, the evolving media landscape, and I suppose adding things as they become important, particularly for agencies. And so basically we have these top level summary media channels, and then we have what is the total reach for each of these media channels in any given week. And you can see here some of these are pretty large channels in terms of total video, audio, news, for example, and social, all in the 90% and above. And then sitting below these top level channels, you can sort of unpack them. And I suppose video is the one to unpack when you've got the free to air TV and the catch up TV and the streaming services, YouTube, pay TV, etc. Or if it's audio, it's radio and it's streaming and it's podcasts. With social, there was a particular desire to call out Facebook and Instagram. I think since we've done that, there's been more desire to perhaps call out other ones. And again, this is interesting because I personally didn't consider Facebook to be a media channel, but we were met with a fairly universal answer back from agencies was it is. And so that's part of, like I said, it's part of sort of expanding out really what is now considered a media channel. And with outdoor, you've got billboard and digital, but we've got other formats as well. So I think that the idea here is, one, just a slightly sort of new construct for putting together all of the different platforms out there into a succinct sort of summary of channels, all with its reach. But also the plan is to continue to expand these. And I think one of the next things that we'd like to do is look at it from a genre or category perspective. So an example of that might be sport, technology. And so be able to look at, well, where does sport sit across social, news, audio, video, etc. So there's some fairly substantial plans we have in the background about how we're going to take this and sort of build this out over time. The next thing, of course, is that you look at some of those numbers and you say, well, they're pretty big, but where we've now introduced this new measure, which is really an ad addressable reach, which is, well, out of that total reach, what is the reach where you can actually place an ad? Now, of course, traditionally things like TV and radio, there's been the ABC, and with news as well, there's been the concept of having the ABC as sort of the one major platform that doesn't carry advertising. But increasingly with some of these new platforms, and particularly the streaming platforms, there really is actually a massive disconnect between the total reach and the ad addressable reach. So you can sort of see there that over 82% of people who have Netflix actually don't see ads. They pay money to avoid seeing the ads, and with Spotify it's pretty close at 78%. So there is quite a big disconnect between saying that 72% of the population in any given week watch streaming video services, but only 27.6% of them actually get ads. And you can see even with radio, there's a bit of a disconnect there too, in terms of the amount of people that only listen to the ABC radio at just under 14% of people. So really the main takeaway here is there's the concept of total reach, and then there's the concept of what proportion of that channel is actually carrying an ad. And the reason why this is becoming more important, not less important, is because, like I said, many of the newer platforms give you the opportunity to avoid ads, and more people are actually putting their money into these platforms. So there's actually been obviously continued growth in these streaming video platforms. If you think about all of Australians, almost 2 subscriptions per household across the whole of Australia. And if you were to just focus on people who have a subscription, because remember, not everyone has a subscription, but out of the ones that do have streaming video subscriptions, it's actually about 3 subscriptions per household. The other thing, of course, is, and this is not new, but it is sort of the world we live in, is that we have to remember that people do go out of their way to avoid seeing an ad if they can, and paying money to help them do so. And so if you think about just the internet, you've got the use of ad blockers, with about 4 out of 10 people using ad blockers. And the interesting takeaway here is, though, if you have a look at the people who actually do use ad blockers, they are actually pretty attractive audiences. They're likely to be the big spenders, the top socioeconomic quintiles, and the people who are the most likely to try new things out, the early adopters. So it's a sort of a double-edged, it's a double whammy really, which is, more people are doing it, and also these are quite attractive audiences for a lot of advertisers as well. And as part of this journey, which is to sort of say, well, what's a media channel? What's the reach of that channel? How many people can actually possibly see an ad on that channel? Then the next question, of course, is let's go beyond reach and say, what is the quality of that audience? And so just because you can get in front of that audience doesn't necessarily guarantee you any impact. So this is where we started to consider, well, what sort of data can we develop to help you understand how much attention and how much engagement these audiences are showing. And so we've got 2 new quality of audience metrics, one being audience loyalty and the other one being audience engagement. Audience loyalty, as the name would suggest, it's based on frequency of usage. So this is the concept of saying, if someone watches, 2 minutes of TV a week, they are that's reach. They're part of the reach calculation. And if someone spends 10 hours a week watching TV, from a reach perspective, they aren't any different. They're considered reach as well. But we all know there's a big difference between someone spending 10 hours with something and only a few minutes with something. And I suppose it's a bit like the way that a retailer would segment its shoppers, to say, I think we'd probably treat our regular high value shoppers maybe a little bit differently to our low value shoppers. And I think that's what sort of loyalty is about. And then the other measure is a much more of a qualitative measure around attention and engagement. And it's really about how deeply each audience is engaging with each media channel. So with the loyalty one, we have a range of quantitative, and always have had a fairly substantial range of quantitative measures around how much time people spend, or how many page views people have, for example, or how many channels or how many programs people watch. So there's a lot of quantitative measures to understand how deeply people engage from a frequency perspective. but we didn't really have it from more of this qualitative perspective. So, the best way to start that process, of course, is to go out and do some focus groups. So this is where we just went back to Australians and asked them, what do they consider to be a media channel? How do they consume media? What makes them show attention to media? What role does media play in their lives? Like which platforms spark conversations? We explored, the role of advertising and how, where does advertising actually work? So a whole, as you would in this sort of environments, exploring with consumers bottom up just what they think about media and how they consume media. And then what we did was we found a whole sort of raft of common themes came from these focus groups, which were really around what grabs attention, such as the importance of the media channel in their lives, the relevance of the media channel or the content, the shareability, personalization, topics of interest. So things like, this concept of people like to get together the next day and they like to talk about, what did they watch last night, or what movie did they go and see, or what's happening in the news, for example. And then this other piece, which is around advertising. And, we went in with the assumption that most people find advertising annoying when it comes down to media, and actually most people do. But what we did find was, and it's not surprising, is that the more relevant and contextual the advertising is, it starts to become considered more useful and engaging. So it all comes down to context more than anything. Relevance and context makes a really big difference to advertising in media channels. So again, a lot of these things we sort of knew, but it was good to go back to basics to hear them again. And then from those groups, we constructed a series of attitudinal questions about each media channel, which then served the basis for this new audience engagement metric that we've developed. And to try to simply communicate, what did we find? This we thought was a fairly simple way of being able to do that. So this, what you're seeing on the screen now, is the various media channels ranked in terms of their ad addressability. So you've got social media, for example, up the top, followed by news, TV, radio, YouTube, etc. So that's in terms of ranking it in terms of just pure ad addressable reach. The first sort of theme or pillar of the engagement question was, to what degree are people showing attention? That means they're focused and absorbed. So this particular pillar is probably closer to that concept of attention. And so, again, probably a little unsurprisingly, cinema tops that list. And I suppose it's because it's one of the few environments where people, they turn off their phone, they don't multitask, they can't pause the cinema movie, and they're locked in a dark room and it's very immersive. So it is a very high attention environment. This is followed by news, and that's because the consumption is very purpose driven. So people are actually actively looking out and seeking out the latest headlines and being informed. It's also quite routine behaviour, checking in on the news numbers of times a day. So it's creating loyalty, but people are very actively engaged with it. And I suppose rounding out the top three, it was really interesting to see YouTube actually rounded out the top three, and we believe that's because of the personalised algorithms that's sort of keeping people engaged. So this is because you can find videos that match your mood or match your interest, or you want a DIY video on how to change an oil filter or whatever it might be. So a lot of people certainly will start their YouTube session very, very focused and engaged. They may not end it like that, but they certainly start it. And the other one is podcasts. That's actually another one that came up really high as well. And I think that's because, with your headphones on or whatever, it feels like a one-on-one conversation with the podcast host. And again, you're probably picking podcasts that match your interest or mood. So they're very high quality environments where people are saying, I'm actually really engaged, I'm showing maximum attention, I'm seeking things out, I'm looking for something. Um, and this is really different to what sits at the bottom of the list, where you've got radio. And of course, and that's not to say that radio isn't good. It's just that a lot of radio is consumed in the background, whether or not you're a tradie on a work site with the radio going in the background, or in the car, TV, similar sort of thing as well. You might be in and out of the room, you might be multitasking on your phone, and you're chilling. You're not necessarily actively focusing and engaged. You're just sort of wanting to sort of chill out a little bit and just have the TV on. So a little bit of a different environment. The next pillar was the concept of where people spend time with the media channel, and they walk away going, that was quality time. I feel like the time I invested in that media channel was really good time, and it was really worth it, as opposed to I walk away saying, I have just wasted all my time. I don't know where the last, 5 hours have gone. Oh my God, I have just whittled it away. And so this is a flip of it. So this is where, from rank from top to bottom, in terms of where people ultimately come away feeling like they've wasted their time. So social media, I suppose, to some degree, unsurprisingly, tops the list there. And I suppose it's because, if you think about it, social feeds are designed to be infinite. You're passively scrolling, you're losing track of time. A lot of the content can be repetitive and forgettable. And also people tell us that they're frequently checking their social media feeds out of habit or boredom. The next one is YouTube, which is interesting because YouTube is sort of it's a platform that has a lot of positive, but also equally has some negative. And the negative with YouTube is that it's those same addictive algorithms that basically get you in focused on how to change an oil filter in your car. Then all of a sudden, 4 hours later, you're just watching one more video. And so what sort of starts as sort of an educational or purposeful experience often spirals just into, time lost to unrelated content or binge watching. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, down the bottom, you can see music streaming. Obviously, people they're listening to the music that they love, the artists that they love, and people consider that time very, very well spent. Same with radio, same with cinema, same with catch-up TV, your podcasts, your news. So all of those things which are more purposeful, where you're seeking things out to be informed. These are channels that people consider to be time well spent. And then sort of one of the other key themes in this metric is the role of advertising, and to what degree advertising is seen as a positive or negative contributor to the experience. And again, you can see at the top, you've got YouTube, TV, social media, or environments where the advertising is seen as people are annoyed by the ads. And if you flip to the bottom, things like outdoor magazines, news, cinema, podcasts are channels where the advertising is actually considered to be far more positive. And so, I suppose when you look at something like social media, you've got sort of highly targeted ads based upon your user behavior, but a lot of people can get a bit creeped out with privacy concerns, and also just the sheer amount of ads that sort of leads to banner blindness. And on the other hand, out of home, people consider those to actually be often, useful, bold, impactful, clever. So outdoor is actually seen quite favourably, and often is contextual as well, because it might be in a retail media environment as well. Same with magazines. Magazines often have an aesthetic to their advertising, often being seen as sort of aspirational. And I suppose to some degree, a bit like news, it can complement the editorial. So you might have a travel article or a travel story that's complemented by some nice travel advertising. So those sort of things where the advertising is seen as contextual and relevant and helpful. And those are the channels like outdoor magazines, news, cinema, podcasts are where the ads have a more impactful relationship to the media. So what I was going to sort of talk to you about now is so we're in summary, it means that we've now got a sort of a redefined list of media channels. We've got the weekly reach, we've got the ad addressable reach, we've got sort of this concept of loyalty, so how much people are using the channel, and also now how much people are engaging with the channel in terms of ads, time, shareability, and attention. We've brought that data to life in terms of a little easy to use tool as well, which just gives you a bit of a rule of thumb for your target audience about how you might apportion your media budget across the media channel. So I'm just going to sort of take you through how that works, and again show you some examples of the data in action. So the first thing that you would do in the tool is that you would create your audience, because basically everything starts with an audience. In this instance here, I'm going to show you a few more examples in a minute, but in this instance here, it's people who have an investment property loan. And so you choose your audience, then you can filter that audience. So you've got a bunch of things you can do here. You can choose the product or service category that the campaign relates to. So in this instance, being an investment property loan audience, it's in the banking category. We're filtering it to people over 50, but we could have had people under 35, females, males, capital cities, etc. And also, do we want to optimize this plan based upon loyalty or engagement? So they're the two measures we have today. We are planning to do a few more of these optimization metrics, but today we've got loyalty and engagement. And effectively, with a couple of quick selections, you're able to get a bit of a rule of thumb as to where you might be thinking about spending your media budget. So this is sort of the beginning. So I just want to sort of stress here, it's not to say you've got to follow this as a hard rule. It's really designed to help people perhaps who are not native planning experts to maybe get a bit of a lie of the land about how each channel performs against the target market. So you get to see what the data is telling you, as opposed to perhaps just purely performance driven. The other thing, I think, the other bit of feedback here is that, a lot of agencies or clients, advertisers tend to do the same thing. So often don't sort of go, oh, actually, I've never considered cinema, for example. I've never thought about cinema. This is telling me that the cinema is quite good. Maybe I should think about that. So part of it's, again, just challenging maybe some ways of working and opening your mind to perhaps other channel opportunities that you perhaps might not consider. So what happens is that it effectively just presents back to you what could be a recommended budget allocation across those main media channels. It shows the media channel performance across the ad addressable reach and the optimization metric that you've chosen. And in this instance, it was the based upon engagement. It presents it as quadrants. So anything that's sort of on the right-hand side of that bubble chart is going to be high ad addressable reach, and anything that sits at the top of the chart on the vertical axis, that's where you're going to get the higher engagement. And so you've got, for example, just a couple of call outs would be at the top left-hand corner, you've got cinema, and that's because cinema is a high quality engaged environment, but it does sit on the far left-hand side because obviously it does have comparatively low reach, even if it's got high engagement. And for this particular campaign, you've got news that sits over the far right-hand side, where you have a combination of high ad addressable reach and sort of higher than average engagement attention as well. And this data flows into a little table where you can get to sort of see what the total reach, the ad addressable reach, what the loyalty or frequency score is, what the engagement score is, the recommended budget allocation, and whether or not it's above or below what the media advertising industry is currently doing now for those types of campaigns. So for example, here what we're saying is that we would, for this particular target audience, we would suggest less money is spent in video than would normally be allocated to video for a banking campaign. And for example, that we would perhaps put some more money in things like outdoor or cinema than would normally be the case. So that's how you would sort of read this table, and that data goes into the same level of detail, goes down into those sort of sub channels. So although video here is not performing great at a total level, you will see the catch up and the pay TV, for example, do perform a bit better in their own right. So there's just a little bit more detail here to I suppose, again, challenge some thinking, provide some opportunities to think about. What I just wanted to do now is to say, obviously, there are hundreds of thousands of target audiences that you could possibly come up with. Here are just a few, just to show you how things can dramatically change depending on the target audience that you're choosing. So this is what we just talked about, which is the investment loan campaign. If you're optimizing on engagement, so it's just what you saw. Had we actually optimized on loyalty rather than engagement, so this is about the time spent or the depth of quantitative, engagement people are having with the channel, it is actually quite a bit of a different story. So this idea of offering a couple of ways of looking at the audience and the optimization metric, I think, is quite useful. And as I said, I think we'll have more of these. So there is many ways that you can sort of cut and dice the audience, but you can see that video it almost doubles. And goes from a recommendation of down weighting to a recommendation of up weighting. For example, same target audience, but it's a different optimization metric depending on, I suppose, what your objectives are or what you're trying to achieve. But if you were to, for example, run a women's accessories campaign, this is what the data would look like there. So, for example, things like magazines and outdoor perform really well there. If you're running sort of a government campaign or a mental health campaign, you've got news publishing would work really well there. If you were doing a cosmetics campaign, you've got outdoor and social being sort of the big pieces covering the channels there. If you're running a car accessories campaign, you've actually got audio's a very strong performer there, and automotive. If you're running a business decision makers campaign, you've got your news publishing, and you've also got a little bit of cinema in there as well. And if you're running a campaign targeting people who are early adopters, particularly in the technology sector, you'll see that outdoor is actually a very, very strong performer there. Cinema is one of cinema's performs really strongly on that one as well. So as you can imagine, there's, like I said, there's hundreds of thousands of different sorts of target audiences. So the idea is to really be data led. I think that's probably the main thing here, is to have the data available for all of the target audiences that you might consider, and have a range of metrics that you can look at what the data is telling you, and that can feed into your own decision-making purposes. And like I said, some of the feedback we've received, probably the biggest feedback we've received so far has been, that's really interesting. I hadn't normally considered that. We normally wouldn't do that. That might be an interesting conversation to have with the client now, and show the client the data and maybe see if there's some appetite to maybe do it a little bit differently. And I think that's really part of this, is just the sort of challenge, like I said, not only the status quo, but particularly things where things are just increasingly just performance led. I do it because it worked. I'll do it again. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with that. It's just to say that here is an opportunity to consider some other ways that you might approach it. And then maybe just to finish off, because I know that all of you are very busy and you probably don't really pay much attention to what Roy Morgan does, but there's a few things that I think maybe today, just to let you know, unless you didn't know we've done these things, that might be of interest to yourself and your clients. We've done an integration with Ipsos, which means the iris data is available in Roy Morgan, and that and increasingly that will be a strategy of Roy Morgan's, and this is really just to it's just to make it easier, ultimately, for our clients to have one currency number where that's applicable, so you're not really going between different systems. So that was something that we just launched a few months ago. The other one was a range of new audience diversity metrics with the Media Federation Australia. So these are sort of like physical, mental health, neurodivergent audiences. We're also going to be introducing even more diverse audiences around culture and language, media preferences later this year as well. So that's a bit of an ongoing piece of work. We've got this sort of new revised list of media channels, including the podcast data, which was released earlier this year. The concept of not just total reach, but where the audience can actually see an ad, this sort of quality of audience measures around loyalty and engagement, and just having a quick rule of thumb with an easy to use piece of software to help you maybe just quickly within a few clicks see where your audience sits across the media channels. So I suppose just as I wrap up there, if there's anything's of interest here and we run out of time today, just let us know. If you'd like to see something in more detail, we can organise a demonstration or anything like that. And I know some of you are clients anyway and may have already done so, but for everyone else, if you'd like any more detail, just reach out to us. And I suppose if you've got any questions today, it'd be great to hear from you.
Are there any questions, guys? And so often there isn't, Howard, so we can pass them on to, if anyone comes back with them, goes, I really want to ask that question, shoot them through to us and we can pass them on to Howard to get those answered for you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Super interesting, Howard and Kate. Very, very interesting stuff around the way you've really looked at it. So, and channel planning, I found that absolutely fascinating in this day and age, and everything happening with mixed media modeling and how that kind of aligns and plays around. So super interesting. Just a reminder, members, 24th, which is this Thursday in Brisbane for the members. Catch up with that. Oh, hang on a second. Andrew's got
There's
one.
been a couple of questions, so it's available now, and yes, we can. So I think if you probably the answer is yes, it's available right now. The data's in market. So I think the best thing is if you just want to drop.
Angela, I'll reach out to you, and Sophie as well.
And that goes for any of you. Just let us know, and we can follow you up with that. But yeah, everything, all the data's in market.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. And then finally, next Wednesday, the 30th, we're in Melbourne for the Audio Bites at Half Dome, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, Roy Morgan, for that. That was great. And thank you, members. Talk to you next Monday. Cheers.
Okay, thanks.